assuming I know what I'm doing. Okay, this is the Genealogist General's Forum number 4. I'm Gary Green, and today's date's March 27th. We're going to have an overview from our chairman of the Genealogy Committee, Bill Schwicke, to give you an update of what occurred during leadership. I'm going to discuss some pended items that I recapped during the leadership meeting with the Genealogy Committee. And we have what everybody's been asking for, another checklist, but I want to go through this to show that it deals with those of you who are points of contact or the last person to look at things before it goes to national. I want to take a look at what facts we want on the application and what we are adding, and it's causing delays in looking at the applications. I want to have a little bit of discussion on proof arguments. We've recognized that as being something that we aren't really strong with in the SAR, and we may need to adjust the way we look at it. And then I want to go through how a state point of contact can review approved applications using the PRS. And what this should do is allow you to go back and say, here's what's been approved, but look at the mistakes that were put in parentheses or that sort of thing to work out so that you'll know not to do those in the future. And then we'll come up with some feedback and questions. So if I can, I'd like to open up to Bill Schwicke, if you like, give us an overview of the Genealogy Committee report.
Thanks, Gary. At the Genealogy Committee meeting at Spring Leadership, we addressed the use of DNA in applications. We did not change the current policy allowing you to submit DNA for generations 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, but we've added another avenue to use DNA, and that will not become part of our policy until we get the approval of the XCOM. And that's because this touches on an area they've been involved in before, with the possibility of significant financial impact and legal liability. We think we have opened DNA use and avoided financial impact and legal liability by allowing the applicant to use anything except the 1 to 2, 2 to 3, to use a professional genealogist. The applicant will hire an accepted professional genealogist, and they will answer the question posed using DNA, and we will accept their conclusion to that question on a lineage. It's open to any form of DNA currently known or in the future discovered. The only requirement is that it has to be a genealogist that we have accepted. Currently, what we're willing to accept once this is approved by the XCOM is a certified genealogist who declares a specialty in DNA. If you go to the board for certification of genealogists, you will find there are 20 such genealogists that declare such a specialty. And of those, there's 17 active, 3 are retired. So it's a fairly small group that we're already looking at ways to expand that. So what the applicant can do is pose the question, that's the problem, to the professional genealogist, in this case, one of the 17 accepted, and then the applicant pays all the cost for that, and the professional genealogist assumes responsibility for the release of private information. They take care of that. And then they will submit a report. Their report will be filed in a do not copy file in Louisville. And an executive summary will be made that poses the question and the conclusions. And that is what the staff genealogist will look at and will accept the conclusion. And if in the future you ordered the proof documents for that application, it's that executive summary that you would be able to get. We think this answers some of the questions we've had before. It opens up, I think, widely the use of DNA, though it does have drawbacks. And number one is cost, and talking to people that actually do these applications, we're looking at probably $2,500 minimum in cost to do that. And in the past, that's held us back. We didn't want to approve something with such a cost to it. But we've reached the point that there are people that really need to use DNA for their applications. And we don't want to say no just because it's expensive. And we want to open that up to them. If they're willing to make that effort, we're willing to accept the results. So that's basically where we are. We're waiting XCOM approval, and then it will become part of policy. And Gary, if you want to allow me to answer questions now that this is fresh, that might be appropriate.
Okay, John Sinks.
Yes. Bill, let us suppose that an applicant needs DNA to prove the link between generations 4 and 5. Will
Okay.
the professional genealogist also evaluate the standard proof from generations 5 to say 11, where 11 is the generation of the revolutionary ancestor?
If I understand your question, John, that the answer would be what we look at would be simply the report on the question asked and the conclusions by that genealogist, and it could stretch from 4 to 11. And we're not going to set a limit right now, like autosomal is.
No, Bill, that's not my question.
All right, then please.
If the DNA is needed for links of generations 4 and 5, and the lineage goes all the way back to 11, but DNA is not needed from 5 to 11, does the professional wind up evaluating 5 to 11 and charging the applicant for that part of the evaluation?
That would be between the applicant and the professional genealogist, but that additional study, not using DNA, we'd be looking for the paper, and we're not going to accept what the professional genealogist says, but if he provides the documentation, they'll have what they need. Did that answer the question, John?
Partially.
Okay.
Basically, if the person says, yes, evaluate the lineage back to generation 4 and 5, because you need an evaluation for the previous generations getting back to the DNA. Can the applicant say, okay, I don't want to pay for the extra, that's part of my application fee, I want staff to evaluate the rest of it?
If I understand the question now, the answer is yes. The applicant can limit what the professional genealogist does or reports on to just 4 to 5.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies.
That answered it? Okay.
Yes.
Gary Jensen.
Yes, the question then, with using the DNA under this format, can you do multiple generations using DNA? Right now, it's just generation 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. Could you go 2 to 3, 3 to 4, all using DNA?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Doug Anderson.
Yeah, one key thing I remember from the meeting was that the staff genealogists are not expected to evaluate the DNA. That's up to the one who was hired to do the evaluation, correct?
Correct.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Bill. I'm going to put Ron
Welcome.
Bearden on the block, and Ron projected some Liberty Medal changes during the meeting. Ron, could you talk to that? This is no notice. If you're not ready to talk, I'll do the best I can to paraphrase.
Well, what we tried to do was, obviously, oak leaf clusters are a problem when you have something like the Liberty Medal where I've got a drawer full of oak leaf clusters. I mean, there's no way they can all fit on a Liberty Medal. So even with the update, now we have the bronze Liberty Medal for 10 sponsorships. And if you get 100, then you get a silver Liberty Medal. And then at 200, you get a gold Liberty Medal. And so what we did was we also put some different categories of oak leaf clusters in so that one oak leaf cluster is equal to 10. A silver is equal to 50, and a gold oak leaf cluster is equal to 100 first line signatures. And so, say for instance, you have the gold Liberty Medal, and then you get 10. That's for 200, and then if you get 10 more first line signatures, you would get a bronze oak leaf cluster to go with that. And you would continue to get bronze oak leaf clusters until you got the 5th one. And at that point in time, you would get a silver oak leaf cluster. And, you know, one of the things we never made clear, we never put in this thing that the National Society be responsible for those. And it was always pretty much my understanding that they would continue to present bronze oak leaf clusters, but once you got 5, then you were at liberty to get a silver oak leaf cluster on your own. And then once you got to the 100 point, so if you had a gold oak leaf, gold Liberty Medal that was represented 200 first line signatures, and then you had 100 additional first line signatures, you would get a gold oak leaf cluster to put on the gold Liberty Medal. And it would go on up till you could get 500, and there would be a bar, and the bar we put in the proposal would be both for, you could get a small bar for a miniature medal or a regular size bar for a large medal. And the bar would say 500, and that would be once you have reached 500 first line signatures. And then once you reach 1,000, you would take the 500 bar off the gold Liberty Medal, and you would put on the bar that said 1,000. And so we've got, you know, several folks in the National Society who have gold Liberty Medals and actually are approaching the 500 mark or even the 1,000 mark. So this is something so we can kind of differentiate between the various Liberty Medals and the oak leaf clusters and all that.
And my understanding is that you still need to present this to the awards medals committee.
Yes, Bill, you might answer Bill Swecky that. It's got several channels it's got to go through. It's got to go through medals and awards, and probably after that to XCOM, I'm sure at least.
Okay. Any questions for Ron Bearden? The last step on this was Genealogy Committee Policies facelift, looking at a different presentation of the same wording. When the DNA change is made, Bill is going to put out a change that's going to change the format of the Genealogy Committee policies, and I hope you'll be able to read it just a little bit more easily. So the next part we're going to talk about are the reasons for pending applications that occurred between July and February 2023. The first ones I'm going to address have to deal with things that I call lack of attention by points of contact at the state level. Bob Fish called them state level errors. Jim Falkenberry called them, he didn't have a name for them to group them, but these same errors have been occurring, and John Sinks identified these same errors when he was genealogist general. So we've got this problem that I think we need to address and put it up front and say, this is a responsibility of the state point of contact to look at these things. And it comes down to the chapter genealogist to say, what are you talking about? And recognizing it so it doesn't go in. So the first one are DAR, CAR applications that don't fit. And the number one prior concern is cut off of the presentation, as in printing was the problem. Instead of printing the full document on the page, they're printing it as if it's an 8x11 page, but printing 8x14 document. So you have to learn how to use your printer. Now the difference between 27 and the +1, 27 of these were on the regular applications, and one of them was on a supplemental. So the supplemental fellow didn't recognize that he had a problem, but 27 of our chapter registrars didn't recognize it, and the state point of contact didn't catch it. The other part is they were putting in applications that were flagged by the DAR. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me why you would put in use a source of a document that's flagged for the reason that you are trying to get this person through. So state points of contact need to look at the DAR records a little bit more closely. The second biggest problem is the birth certificates. And we made a comment in November, I made a comment in November that I are accepting only birth certificates with the gender listed as male. If you don't have that when it comes to you at the state level, you need to send your folks back and tell them to start searching for that birth certificate. I think I had a President General said there were years ago, what we had to do is get in our car and drive to the courthouse to get that. And that may be the next step, but we've got to put some effort into this. The fourth item is application paper and printing. We've had 12 applications put in with improper paperwork. Paper being not the acid-free paper, but just general paper as for the application. That makes no sense to me. Somebody should have caught it, particularly the point of contact. And then the last one is the dates. The dates have a specific format. Date, the month, and then the year. And points of contact are missing this. They're looking at it. You should look at it and say, that's not the right format, and turn it back. So because I really like checklists, I'm going to show you a checklist that we already have on file. This is the 5 items checklist that I expect state points of contact to pick up and make happen. Make sure you're using the right paper and it's in the right form. Make sure everybody's getting their signatures. I don't know, some states, the state registrar runs everything and it runs through him, so he has control of the signatures. Other states have to go to the separate individuals and say, give me the state secretary, give me the state registrar, give me everything that they need. But if you don't have the signatures when it gets to national, it's going to come back to you. That puts you in a hold status. If you don't have the birth certificate with the male gender on it, if you don't have the dates in the proper format, and the DIR application is not in the proper format, these are all going to be put on administrative hold. We have a special task force, if you will. Susan Acree is looking at every application that comes in. She doesn't see these in the proper format. If Mike Scroggins doesn't see it, signatures, or see it on the appropriate paper, it's being sent back, and it's delaying you getting started in the application process. Hopefully, you'll have time to get it back in and then get these things fixed so that you get back into the queue and you're not holding up. But this is going to increase the skill of our staff to go through the application as if everything's there. So these are state points of contact requirements. These are things that I think you need to put into your tool bag and say, I'm looking for these. Don't neglect this part of the game. Any questions on that? John Sinks.
Hi, Gary. Needed to make sure my microphone was down. Over the last several meetings, it has surfaced that some supplementals in particular are not going through the state point of contact, the state registrar. How much is that causing a problem because they aren't even reviewed at the state level?
It does have to go through the state point of contact because it has to have that state signature. What it's not doing is going through the chapter registrar, who has probably the basic knowledge, the best basic knowledge we have in any chapter. So what I'm looking at are guys who are trying their supplementals for the first time. And God knows the first time you do an application, you are behind the Powerball.
Yeah.
So
I had heard that in Tennessee, some of the state chapters were bypassing the state registrar. That may have been misinformation.
yeah, I don't know how they do that and get the signature. They still have to have that signature, but it's possible. Bill Edelin?
Thank you, Gary. My question is for a supplemental application where the applicant is using a record copy for his first 3 generations, which the first is himself. And, he had his birth certificate, the correct one with showing a male and everything. And that's in the record copy. So when you send in a supplemental, are we still needing to send the birth certificate again?
No, if you've got the data there, you're using supplemental for generation 1, using the original document, then you should be okay with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, these are the list of further items, and you'll see the biggest one we have is proof of lineage for all generations. Now, personally, this is not surprising to me. This is where the rubber meets the road. We're having problems because we can't get generation 5 documentation for generation 5 going to generation 6 or 6 to 7 or 7 to 8. So these don't surprise me, don't make me feel bad. It's just these are areas we have to work on. Having the right supporting documentation or stating that the documentation is there and then not submitting it with the package. That seems to be a pretty big problem when you look at it. That we've got 41 applications that have come in that 6 time frame, and somebody didn't even look to see if the package had all the supporting documents. Resolving identity problems, acceptable revolutionary service, residence of the ancestor, those are all kind of problems that we're going to run into, particularly when you're using names that might be common. Robert Smith, John Jones, whatever, you're going to have the common name. You're going to have some problems identifying who that person is, and it's going to take some effort. And then documents that are admissible in evidence. Folks are still trying to submit old-time family genealogies without any source documents, and they keep popping up. So at the state level, you need to stop that nuisance nonsense. And here are the rest of them that happened, and these are the summary for the last 6 months. A new one, which is kind of surprising, but it's going to start rearing its head. We have about 350 flags in the PRS right now. So when you're putting in for putting an application in, you may want to look at the PRS to make sure that your Patriot is not flagged in there for what reason. If it's flagged and you can prove that the flag is wrong, then by all means put it in. It may be that it's flagged for military service and you found civil service for the fellow, and that's perfectly acceptable. But you need to make sure that you're addressing what the flag is about. So take a look at the PRS before you use that Patriot. Any questions on the reasons for pending applications?
Yeah, Gary,
Okay,
I have a couple questions as to the flagging. I don't know who does the flagging. But it would appear to me that if they're going to flag something, they should tell exactly why it's flagged so that when we have to address it, we can supply the information they're looking for.
okay. Have you seen the flags on the PRS? In the PRS, it shows the reason it's flagged at the top. It's flagged for, and then it'll say that whatever reason that is in there, that is
Okay,
part of the
so
flag.
so here's one that I just ran into myself.
Okay,
Guy service was in the 10th Regiment, North Carolina, that was disbanded in June of, I forget, I think it was 78. And his service was for in July. Well, what I found out, and I went through the DAR who originally flagged it, and they said that the War Department had made a mistake because they were continuing to pay people and so forth, putting those dates in July, August, September, even as much as a couple years later, attributing to them to the 10th Regiment that was disbanded, and it was red flag because it was disbanded before the proof was on there. The problem is they didn't take the red flag off. And Ren agreed with me that was, and I've got that stuff all there, but if they're going to red flag it and it's proven otherwise, then it needs to come off and say why.
okay, Bobby, are you saying it was a flag in the DAR or a flag in the SAR?
Both. That was flagged in the DAR and then it was flagged in the SAR, and they're not working together.
Okay. If you could send me the name of the fellow that you talked about with Brendan, I can work with that and see if we can fix that.
Gary, can I put in 2 cents worth here?
Sure.
When you deal with the DAR, they work on a completely different system than we do. If for instance, I find a Patriot that's flagged in the SAR, and I send proof to Denise that the red flag is either incorrect or I found an alternate service, for instance, maybe patriotic service or something like that for that Patriot, and we change him from militia to patriotic service, SAR pretty much changes that immediately, okay? With the DAR, the only time they change anything is when they receive a new application. So if there's not a new application coming in, they won't look at it. Now, I've been through this a couple of times with DAR. I'm sure y'all are familiar with the DAR schools. There used to be a lot of those schools throughout the country. And I think now there's down to 2. We've got one in Alabama, not far from where I live, up at Grant, Alabama. And it's called the Kate Duncan Smith DAR School. Well, I was reviewing an application on the great grandson of Kate Duncan Smith going into the Tennessee Valley chapter probably 10, 12 years ago. And I discovered that the DAR had the wrong date for Kate Duncan Smith's death. Now, after they reported her death, she actually was living in Jefferson County, Alabama with a daughter and son-in-law, and that's kind of the reason they lost track of her. And she actually published a book after her reported DAR death. So I called Larry Miller at DAR, who's a SAR member and a DC Society registrar many years. So anyway, Larry sent me the corrections genealogist information. So I wrote about a 2-page letter, included all the documents to show this, just so they could correct this. And they wrote me a nice letter back and basically said, thank you for your kind attention to this matter. We will file this information, and if anyone else ever applies using this line, then we will consider taking action on it. So the DAR is slow to move. So, you know, I don't think it's an accurate statement to say the SAR and the DAR are in the same bucket, because we're not. SAR will change information about red flags. The DAR is very, very slow to change anything unless they get an application requiring them to look at the information.
John Sinks.
That's not quite right, Ron. DAR will act very quickly if you point out a mistake that will prevent people from getting in on a line or an applicant. I've had 2 experiences where I sent in information. In one case, they had cobbled together information about different men of the same name to create a non-existent person. I documented that, and they flagged that ancestor immediately with the big scary message, cannot be used ever again. I don't remember the exact wording. More recently, within the last week and a half, I received a letter from DAR. I had submitted 2 corrections. They had a single wife for one of my ancestors. And they had gone, they also had accepted the father-in-law of that wife as an ancestor. So I said, okay, here is solid evidence that this was the second wife, that there was a previous wife, and the sons of that first wife are not eligible on the father-in-law. By golly, they flagged that right away. And the second thing was, I said, there's a third wife, and they said, we will evaluate that the next time an application comes in on one of those children. So you're certainly right. If you're submitting a correction that will open something up, they hold off on it. But if you're going to close something down, they don't want to accept people, and they want to let people know not to bother to send in an application.
Now, I agree with that analysis, John. And of course, what I was addressing was not giving them information so they could flag a Patriot. I was trying to get it where we could give them information so they would unlock a flag or unlock an error.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that.
Okay, all right. So we're on the same wavelength.
Okay, we're going to move on to facts that I'm seeing on applications, and these are my observations. I'm seeing a lot of folks putting in the county on an application, but they don't have any source document that shows the county. They know that Philadelphia is in Philadelphia County in Pennsylvania. They know it. I know it. I can look on Wikipedia all day, but we don't have a source document that's being added to the application that shows that county. So look at your source documentation and make sure you have that. Otherwise, you're going to be adding parentheses to your application. Same thing happens with applicant's wife's name without a birth certificate or a marriage certificate. I sure hope every fella that's applying knows his marriage date and knows his wife's name. But if you don't put the birth certificate and the marriage certificate on there, it's not acceptable, and it's a unproven fact. Therefore, it's going to get parentheses around it. Surnames of non-bloodline spouses are things that are being flagged because we don't have documentation that goes with that. It's not necessarily important to go chase down that bloodline, but you're putting the non-bloodline names, but you're putting the names on there as if you're adding a family history and not an application. And the fourth one that seems to jump up a lot is putting a marriage date in there without any marriage record or marriage certificate. I'm seeing that routinely. We know the date, put it on there, but there's no document that's added as a source for that. So what we need to do is to go back and look at the applications and review those applications for the reasons for the parentheses. Why are those parentheses on there? And if it's because the source documentation is not showing up, it's either ask for the source documentation or remove the fact. Any questions on that?
I got a comment.
Okay.
I've had a few lately and I have harped about it, and hopefully I get the point across. But I've had a couple lately, rather than submit the wife's birth certificate, they just omit the marriage certificate and don't list the date. But rather than get the wife's birth certificate showing her date of birth and place of birth and her name, they will include a child's birth certificate where the mother is listed, which is the wife of, the applicant. And on that birth certificate of the child, there's the mother's complete name, her birth date and birthplace. And they're sidestepping getting the information on the wife, trying to use the child's instead. And even though it's a legitimate document, I'm not real happy that they're trying to do that. And I'm trying to bear down a little bit and not accept those things as much. And I tell them, if you have an applicant who says he doesn't want to include his wife's information, say, well, the blank is on the application and you're trying to become a member of our organization. So we want the information and we want you to document it.
Well, exactly right. If you don't have the documentation, just don't add it. If you want to add the name, give me the documentation.
Wife's name is on the child's birth certificate. That much is proven. What's not proven from the child's birth certificate is the marriage date, the marriage place.
Okay.
They're just leaving that off.
We've got a problem within us recently of proof arguments. And the reason is we've left proof arguments as an open-ended document. One recent one was 103 pages long. And it reminded me of the Beetle Bailey comic strip with General Halftrack having his lieutenant coming in with a report. And the general immediately threw it in the trash because he didn't want to read it. It was too long. And I'm getting that feeling from our staff is that if we can't get our act together in preparing a proof argument, then we need to not even put it in. So I would like to entertain a concept of an executive summary, something that says, here's what's available. I could have 103 pages supporting it, but I want you to be able to say, here are the steps, here are the things that we're going to address. Exhibit 1 is on pages 1, 2, 3, and 4. Exhibit 2 is on pages 7 through 10, whatever. But go through a format that's similar to what, it's an executive summary saying, here's the purpose of what I'm trying to prove. What strategies did I use? What did I go through and say I couldn't use it because? List the sources that do support the argument. Any conflicting evidence, and this is particularly the concern when you're trying to prove two men of the same name. What is conflicting and why is it there? Your interpretation of what it is, how the sources demonstrate that relationship, and then a conclusion. And I would like to entertain a concept that the executive summary ought to be no more than 2 pages, preferably 1 page, where you have the references to all the documents that you're going to add, because you will have documents, but not putting them into a narrative that you can't put in a 1-page document. The DAR does this, and they do it as a 2-page PDF document. This is their format. It's very similar to what the executive director came up with. But I need some feedback from you guys. And I probably need it in email format so that we can work on this. But this is very frustrating to the genealogy staff. We're kind of baffling them with BS, is my phrase for it, with having 103 pages to support a document or support a proof. And we ought to be able to say what the proof is very quickly. And then if I don't understand it, I can go to the exhibits and say what you're trying, or try to figure out what you're trying to say. So if you could take a look at these, I will send this back out to everybody so that they can make a jab at it. But I'm looking for some feedback on how to make this a proof argument something that's a little more structured so that the staff can recognize what's coming in and not be feeling like they have to act like general half-track. Anybody have any comments right away?
Gary,
Yes.
this is David Zor, and I'm Bernardo de Galvez in Houston.
Okay.
I was told that the wife, we don't need a birth certificate. We can use the Texas Birth Index, which has all the information on it. Has her name, date of birth, what county, and it has her parents' names.
Okay. That's
Is
true.
that
That's true.
okay?
The only person who has to have the gender on there is the applicant.
Okay, but I mean, you said I had to have the wife's birth certificate. I don't.
Yeah, okay.
But this is a birth index.
Yeah. You have to have a supporting document for the data that you put in there. So the birth index is fine.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take you on a walk. And when we're in the walk, I'm going to go through and log into the Patriot research system. I'm going to use the volunteers and state points of contact capability. I'm going to look at application statistics and filters by society. And on that document, I'm going to look at column 3. And we're going to click on column 3 because it's a clickable link. And I'm going to use Alaska as an example because it's small. What I want you to be able to do is to review the most recent record copies for your state society so that you can say, I see what has gone through and see the errors that might have occurred in your state society so that you can say, we don't need to do those anymore. We can stop them. We can look at it and learn from them. So I'm going to unshare my screen and we're going to share someplace else. Okay, this is the Patriot Research System. The way I got to it was I used the URL up here, sarpatriots.sar.org. Or if you are not really feeling comfortable with that, you can go to the national website and you log in there. And then you go to PRS. On the blue ribbon, there's a PRS. So there are 2 ways to get it. You can memorize the URL that I'm giving you, or you can go to the SAR and just go to PRS and it'll bring it up. So now I'm logged in and I can tell up in the right-hand corner. So if you're a state point of contact or a volunteer, you can do this. Then I want you to find the phrase or the link up here says volunteers. So I'm looking across the top and I come up and I find the word volunteers. When I see that, I'm going to go over to the left and you're seeing a lot more than you would normally see as a volunteer or even a state point of contact, but you want to look for application statistics and filters by society. And you click on it and then you wait. You probably can go build a sandwich because it takes a while. This is a dynamic activity. It's taking the most recent updates that have occurred within the last minute and a half or whatever on the PRS website, and it's building it up. So then it's here by society. So you can go all the way down, all the way up, and we can look at every society that's there. I'm going to use Alaska because it's column 3 and Alaska, and I'm going to click on the number. That's the number of applications that are in Alaska's run from 1889 up to now. And I'm going to ask you to click on last over here so that you get to the end of the documents. And there are 12 pages in Alaska's history. I will tell you that in Alabama's history, there's probably 50 or 60. And in Texas, there are probably 125. So you've got to figure out where this is. But the last page, and about 3/4 of the way in, you're going to find what I call the break point. And the break point is any records that were put in after before 1998, after 1985 are going to have an ACN of 200,000. That was an artificial number that was put in just because Jesse Hagan wanted a way of documenting them. So the 200,000 ACNs are 1985 to 1997, 98. Just above that, though, are the records. If you look here, the date is 2022, August 19th. That's the most current Alaska record that we have in here. So I'm going to look and say, I want to know what's going on with that record. So I go over to the ACN, which is the number on the far left, click on that, and that gives me the flow of the whole document. But the part you need to look at is up here where it says view record copy. And every state point of contact can do what I just did. So if you're the state point of contact and you're working Alaska, this is the document that was sent through. This has been approved. Everything is good, except there are some marks up here. This tells me the guy used commas instead of slash marks to be a differentiation between the locations. So whoever is reviewing Alaska, stop that. Tell them to use slash marks instead of commas. And you can see some other things. This is a pretty good document all the way along because there are a lot of check marks. Guy did a lot of work. It's just he had some little fundamental errors that he could clean up and make it even prettier. So this is a way for you to say, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. Volunteers in the PRS can do this as well. So if you're a registrar at the chapter level and you're a volunteer at the same time, you'll be able to look at this. So what I'm asking you to do is to go back and look at the documents in your state society, the most recent ones that have been approved, and you may or may not have seen them because they don't come back through the state registrar, the state point of contact. They go to the chapter and the chapter distributes them. So this is the only way you have of getting any feedback for what documents are out there. So I need you to kind of get smart in that. We'll go back through it one more time. Get to the web page, go to volunteers, application statistics and society. Go get some lunch, wait for this to come up.
Gary, while you're waiting on it, let me ask a question.
Okay.
Now, we were given access, state registrars and state genealogists were given access, but the copies that we're seeing are not the same as, say, for instance, our current state secretary, who was on the volunteer who headed up the Alabama crew that were volunteers. He sees something a little bit different than I do, and mine has red watermark all over it that says for NSSAR use only.
Right. And there's the reason for that. The volunteers have a need to be able to transcribe the documents, so they don't need a lot of extra stuff on there. You need to be able to see the documents, but the real concern is the volunteers have been told that they don't distribute these documents. They don't pass these out. That wasn't necessarily what we told the state points of contact. We just said, here, we're going to put this watermark on it so that you'll know that you can't use that. So it was, the volunteers were given training to.
Okay,
Recruit.
so as a state registrar, I can't go in and click volunteers, can I?
Yes, you can.
Oh, I can.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
That access that I'm talking about is how you get to it.
Okay,
So then we go, once we get here, go to the state, look at the numbers, go to the last document, and about 3/4 of your number in, and I'm just guessing at this, then you come up with where the break point is between 1997, 98 and the current documents. Okay, any questions on using the PRS?
Well, what about those of us that aren't the state point of contact? Is that helpful to us?
Well, the help is, there are two ways to help. You become a very good friend of the state point of contact, or you become a volunteer and get access that way. But the volunteer, right now, the only requirements the volunteers are having is putting in the updates of the new applications as they're approved. You'd be somebody helping with transcribing those new applications, and then you get to see them anyway.
Gary, I might add that when the record copy or when the application's approved, it's sent back to the state secretary.
Right, and the state secretary then sends it on to the chapter president and doesn't necessarily ever go through a registrar ever again. So you never get any feedback. This is my primary concern. And just like Bobby is saying, if you don't get to see it, you don't get to work it. And that's where the problem is. We've got to get it. I'm trying to get it down to the chapter level to be able to do it. But I haven't got that warm fuzzy yet from the staff at in Louisville. Okay, so see if I can go back here.
Gary, if I could say something real quick.
Sure.
Anybody who's not a volunteer and has issues with looking at record copies or what should or shouldn't be on them, I highly recommend you become a volunteer. It does a couple of things. One, it gets those transcribed, but two, without knowing, you're learning what the genealogists want and don't want on applications. You just instinctively learn that and pick it up. And I've done several hundred of them, transcribing them, and it helps just tremendously on what the genealogists are looking at and what they're not looking at and what they want to approve and won't approve. It helps tremendously, for sure.
And thank you for doing that. The heavy load was borne by some very strong volunteers in the last 4 years. We had 800 folks across the nation volunteering to do that. Without them, we would have no PRS. So thank you, Steve, for your work. Gary Jensen.
I would just say here in Oklahoma, I encourage all of our chapter registrars to be a volunteer so they can see those applications, even though National hasn't given them the chapter registrars that responsibility. At least they can see it as a volunteer, and it helps the applications that I'm getting through as the state point of contact.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the last part that I'm going to go through, and hopefully we can get this done fairly quickly. I've had an update on the changes to the online application. We have opened the online application to Mission Data, asked them to start looking at it, telling us what they think of it. They have deleted the or they fixed, they say that when you add those extra generations or extra wives on generation one, we would click in the wrong place and we'd get a generation one extra wife, couldn't get rid of it. They have fixed that, they say. They've also fixed the supplemental workaround. If you're doing a supplemental now, you can actually click on supplemental and you carry it all the way through instead of having to go back and work around. They're working on junior memorial applications glitch, but their general impression is it's a decent enough code that they'll be able to work with it. And we may not have to spend a large number of bucks just getting up to speed on an application system. That being said, I'm not dreaming anything big yet. They're moving at a snail's pace. They have a limited budget, and this is an exploratory section of reviewing the online application. So we're going to deal with what we have. So I'm here to announce that the next meeting is going to be the 2nd of May. And then we're going to follow that up on the 9th of May. This is going to be a rundown by Ron Bearden. He's going to teach me or us as if we were just picking up the job as state point of contact. If I'm a chapter point of contact and the state point of contact decides to retire or does whatever, goes away, you got to start from someplace. And Ron Bearden has set up a two training session program to go through what he feels is necessary to pass on to the next state of point of contact in his society. So we're going to look at that, and then we're going to get some feedback from those of you who are experienced points of contact and say, well, I do this just a little bit differently, and here's what I do. So you got to be thinking about how you train folks, because my observation is we've got some state points of contact that are probably going to rotate out pretty quickly, and we need to have some way of giving them instruction on what they're going to do. So Ron has taken that chore on, and he's building a presentation. So it'll be the 2nd and the 9th of May, still working at 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. So we can work from there. Any feedback or questions for tonight?
Gary, if I can add just a word here, this is something I've been working on, and Gary's been kind of guiding me through some of this for several months till I got it to the point where it's pretty much where I think it needs to be for someone. And one of my thoughts in this process was, if I step down as state registrar, who's going to take my place? And I felt like the training session needed to be geared more toward that person. It's not for John Sinks or Christopher Smithson or Dennis Van Warmer, who are all excellent genealogists and who I admire greatly, and a lot of others too. It's geared more toward all of these things that Gary has spoken about, where we are having problems. Things like date formats and place formats and all these birth certificates and marriage records and things like that are problem areas that we've been experiencing. This training session is going to specifically discuss those things and how to make sure we're doing it correctly, and that's kind of what it's geared toward.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Bill Edelin.
Thanks, Gary. I have a question that kind of off topic, but I have a old member who joined some 30 years ago, and he made an inquiry to me about he'd like to get back involved. And so, I know we do a reinstatement, but is there any kind of lapse in time? He hasn't paid dues or anything in the last 29 years. So he wants to get reinstated. Is there anything that's required special other than reinstatement and the fees?
No, the reinstatement is God bless you, come on back. That's all you can do. I think in North Carolina, we charge them $5. I mean, that's quite a chump change compared to what he had to pay for dues all that time.
Thanks. That was the question.
Okay, I see no other questions. I'm going to call this meeting at 9 o'clock, and thank you very much for participating tonight. Good feedback from everybody along the way, and we'll look forward to our next meeting on the 2nd of May. And Ron Bearden, you're up to bat.
I need to unmute. I said, I hope I don't strike out.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.